This is the first OGM call, Open Global Mind call of 2025. It's going to take me a little while to get used to writing 2025 on anything. It's a quarter century down. I can remember the year 2000 as if it was 5 eras ago. Um, kind of crazy. Hey, Klaus. Good, 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 good. We had a very nice retrospective call last time. Oh, I should also say that next week I cannot make the call, and I will be giving a talk in the middle of the call, so I won't be able to start the Zoom either. So we need to figure out some kind of impromptu bridge for next week's OGM call. I'll mention that again at the end of the call, and we'll figure something out online. Last week we had a nice call, kind of retrospective lessons learned from the year, and this year it seemed appropriate to say, hey, what thing would you like to do that you're willing to share with OGM that would make 2025 a special year? And then we can kind of offer some help, just listen, whatever it is anybody would like to talk about. Hey, Jose. And also, is there any unfinished business? Is there anything in the air? Is there anything you'd love to say? At the end of the year is a nice marker, a nice turning point. So, any thoughts about OGM-ish things that are in your heads or hearts? Oh, Stacy, please.
I was thinking about this earlier, so I just need a second. Yeah, I have a question that I wanted to bring into this space. And I really hate being the one to ask this question because on its face, it's like the most ignorant question to ask. But I really think it needs to be asked. So my question is, why are we so focused on books and reading when we know most people don't read? And is that the right way to go forward if we're looking to build these kinds of bridges? So to narrow it down a little bit, I'm really playing with the difference between the spoken word and the written word and the power in both of those and the timing and the placement.
That is a very good question. I have a take on it, but Gil has one also. So, Gil, please.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question, not an ignorant question, Stacy. Thank you for asking. Especially given the several posts that have come through lately, observing that I'm going to say kids, college students don't read books, apparently can't read books. Professors are finding they cannot assign books to people because people just have not developed the capacity to maintain, I don't know, maybe to maintain that continuity of concentration. But it's a very, I mean, I was stunned. I'm shocked. It's a very different phenomenon than we grew up with. As I reflect on it, I notice that I don't read books as much as I used to because I'm sort of locked into this blip-vert world that we've inherited. So I think it's a great question. Does that mean other kinds of media? What does that mean? I think great question, Stacey. Great provocation.
Thank you.
Cool. Other thoughts on Stacey's question? Alex.
I would say, Stace, it's a brilliant question, but I would just contribute with one more question. I love reading books. I no longer seem to find the time to read books because having to actually go, I don't know, for some reason, that time has disappeared. And I'm not saying I don't have free time. I mean, I choose to watch TV in the evening or whatever, but it just somehow, that part of me has kind of shrunk to almost nothing. I do read the odd book, but nowhere near as much. Thoughts?
If I can add to that,
Please,
I
Mike.
so love to read books, and I have a pile of about 15 that are on the must read now pile. I mean, it used to be there were, 150 on the I want to read it someday, but now I have books that either for work or for my own personal development, I really feel I've got to get through this, and I'm just not finding it. And part of it is the distraction of social media, which I have gotten even more addicted to now that I'm using Twitter less and playing with says.us and Blue Sky and Threads. But I think Stacy's question is exactly the right question. If we're going to have a impact beyond the intelligentsia represented in this call, one thing that probably would help us a lot as we explore that is to get people who are under the age of 30. My daughter's 27, and she does a lot of her learning outside of class. She's in a master's program. So much of her learning is watching a 8-minute YouTube video. Certainly when she has a problem, a question that she needs to go address, that's probably the first place she looks, just to see what this expert cites as their source of truth. That often leads to 2 more videos, maybe a TED Talk, maybe a BBC podcast. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there, and we don't capture it. In my world of internet policy, books are the least useful thing because it takes 6 to 18 months to publish a book, and by then there have been 3 more technological revolutions and 5 more stupid ideas coming from different parliaments on whatever the topic is. So blogs are sort of my source of information. And sometimes they do refer to books when it requires the historical context. But yeah, I very much appreciate your question, Stacy, and it could be that we need to double the size of this group and get some different skill sets here, and people who aren't reading books but are learning a lot as the flow of information gets forever greater. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Repeating the question for John, because he put in the chat. Stacy asked, why are we so focused on books in this group when reading books and reading when we know people aren't reading that much? And
If
so
I
we're
can
going
add
around.
one more thing, a little factoid. I may have mentioned this on a call several months ago, but my wife works for the Sunnylands Trust, which organizes these big picture conferences out in Palm Springs. Big picture, high level, low profile. But they did one with the Barbara Bush Foundation, and she has done a huge amount of research and demonstration projects on adult literacy. And the numbers are just stunning. More than 100,000 Americans, 100 million Americans don't read at the 6th grade level, and something like 40 million don't read at the 3rd grade level. And that difference, just that difference there, is worth about $20,000. And of course, all of our material on COVID and on health issues usually start at 10th grade level, and then if they work hard, they dumb it down to the 7th grade level. But we're missing half the market because of that. So Joe Rogan has a lot more impact than the New York Times because he's emotional and he's oral.
So maybe we're making a big circle back to oral culture. Let's go Rick and then Marshall.
Yes, Stacey, I thought it was a good question too, actually. So I appreciate that. Let me just say something about my own personal habits, which my bookshelves are full. I have to get another bookshelf if I need another book. So what I've been doing is actually I listen to books. Particularly, I walk and listen a lot. And then I decide, do I want to buy the book? And there's certain books that I buy based upon listening. So my habits have changed. And then when you look at the podcast you can listen, it's just incredible what you can do. I would like to put into the conversation the idea of AI-enabled neo-learning, which I'll share a link to that. I just took a Substack article and took the beginning of it, put it in a LinkedIn article, and I called it Happy Neo-Learning Year. And I think we're on a threshold of how people learn very differently, and AI enables to do that very well. So, one of the things that, as a recovering academic, I still haven't got rid of my habits of writing complex questions and complex sentences. And, as Klaus, I've heard him repeatedly say, how do you appeal to different people's integral levels? Well, the nice thing about AI is you can say, reduce this to a 12th grade reading level and reduce it to a 6th grade reading level. So to touch on the earlier point about health literacy, there are lots of people out there who work on this area. So it's a well-recognized problem. But to me, that means we have to reimagine how people learn about what we want our future to be. So on that point, I will stop and I'll pop a link into this intro article, which is actually designed for lifelong intergenerational learning. And I've been playing around with this idea, and I feel like I'm just getting to a point where, some people might be willing to dive in and try and do a different learning method. And the other big problem I see is that we're incredibly atomized. So that you go on LinkedIn, you get a few articles here, it's content, people are pushing their content, you get a few likes, but it's not really asynchronous engaged learning. So I think the real challenge is, how do you harness the power of online experiences such as this, which very few people watch? But is there some way of creating some sort of value that comes out of it that other people who don't have to listen to an hour's conversation can get the essence of what's really important, and then decide, do I want to come and participate in this community? And then the other is how to design things such that things are iterative rather than isolated learning events. There is some iteration that goes on between the events and creating continuity. So, Jerry, from the point, I didn't come last week because I was working on that day. My work day has changed. So I'm available on Thursdays now. But, how to, summarize what happened last year. Are we having some sort of continuity of learning, or are these isolated events that often are useful in their own way, but in terms of creating some sort of ongoing, call it tapestries of conversation, whatever metaphor you want to do, where people are developing more effective relationships of collaboration. Anyway, I've said enough.
Thanks, Rick. Let's go Marshall, Alex, me, Klaus. So Marshall first.
I just want to add that
Yeah.
I want to add that time spent reading books, even on paper, is some of the happiest times of my life. If I'm able to make 10 or 15 minutes in a day to read, a long form thought, it just delights me and regularly connects serendipitously to life and other things that I've read. And I do enjoy, going to Perplexity, for example, web search with AI, asking for context and background on some of the things that I'm reading. Ursula Le Guin says that no mere rote memorization will, without learning the lore of a spell or a charm, will deliver true mastery. I should get that one down better, but yeah, I feel like, and I'm happy to be supported in coming back to the path of reading books in a conversation like this, hearing about what other people are excited to be reading, even if the rest of the world is reading less. It feels like a necessary, if not sufficient, approach. And in a world of information superabundance, I think that a sustainable relationship with that abundance can include peer celebration of reading paper books and or digital books, and what we're excited about. So I love it.
Thanks, Marshall. Alex.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief because I've already had a say. Listening to everything you guys said, Rick as well, was said about AI and everything. I just wonder whether what has changed is the way information is either coming at us. Obviously, the internet has had a big effect, AI now, but also just generally, we're getting so much more information, so many more things to do, so many targets, so much this. I'll give an example because I speak to Gil on an unhealthy weekly or bi-weekly basis. And Gil's a very well-read person, as indeed all of you are actually. And he always says, if you read so-and-so, he said X, Y, Z. You must read that book. I've got a list of 15 of these to read, which I haven't yet started even one. And I just wondered if it, because if I read the whole book, the only bit that's relevant is the one bit that we were discussing with Gil. So would I read the whole book for that? It just strikes me that maybe something has changed about that. We've got so much information that now, I don't know, we don't have time or relevance to read the whole book. And I'm saying that with a heavy heart. I've got no doubt if I read the whole book, I'd really be a much better person, well-read person. But is it something to do with the amount of information floating around?
Good question, Alex. I'm loving this conversation, and also want to wish everybody a happy new year. This is the first call of the new year. Uh, Thanks for everybody who can make the call. Let me go for a bit, and then Klaus and Stacy. And I've been taking notes in the chat as I sometimes do. So I'm going to talk my way through this. First, if nobody's reading, and you'll see that this all sort of melds together. If nobody's reading, why are there so many books right now? Everybody's publishing a book. Maybe it's because we've cheapened the book. Maybe because everybody saw, oh my God, if I write a book, everybody will think I'm smart or noteworthy and then quote me or hire me. I don't know. But if you look at the publishers, there is a lot of material coming into the world, not to mention self-publishing, and there's all sorts of nifty vehicles for self-publishing. Long form media seems not to have died. People are happy to listen to 3-hour podcasts and audiobooks and other kinds of things. Those things are resuming along. I refuse to do audiobooks for 2 reasons. One, I don't like the people at Audible, and they seem to have a monopoly on the market, and they charge too much. But number 2, I can't take notes easily with audio, and I'm busy annotating my brain when I read, and I need to be able to sort of copy paste. So I do Kindle a lot, and I'll try to highlight stuff or just write notes. But if I'm audio only, then it probably means I'm walking or something, and that doesn't really work for me. There is tremendous competition, as Alex said, from Bling, but also, as Gil said, from timely posts. Like I subscribe to way too many Substack newsletters, some of which are right on the money and right, hours after something happened. The problem is that shifts you often into the mode of quick newsy stuff, like, event, and interpretation, as opposed to, I think, the deeper, thoughtful stuff that finds its way into books. In Neo Books, we've had this conversation several times about why do we call it Neo Books? Maybe we should call it Neo Learning or something else. Rick has suggested that. It's a really good question. From my perspective, the reason we call Neo Books is that books are well-known cultural objects that are attractors, they are bait. And the really interesting thing is how ideas live in community and get enriched by discussion and community. And we're trying to figure out how to instantiate that and model that so people can go, oh, a book is merely a snapshot of a group of ideas in time. It's just a frozen, like Han Solo and carbonite. That's what a book is. And the ideas themselves should be alive and giving fruit and multiplying themselves. There is a big question about whether reading is obsolete and whether ChatGPT and LLMs make reading obsolete. Are we just going to be taking a bunch of ideas, putting them in a corpus, and giving people a chatbot access to that corpus? And I'm unclear how that turns into something approximating the experience of a book, because you then don't have to make your way through the logic of a book. You don't have to make your way through the background. You don't know what to ask of a corpus. So maybe the chatbot is really smart and can see what you know and test you and induct you into the material. I haven't seen that done yet. That sounds really interesting to me, because there's sometimes stuff you already know that's repeated in the book. So why read it? Who knows? But I'm unclear. There's also another trope that Danny Hillis came up with years ago about, hey, maybe writing and reading is just a temporary human hack. Maybe we'll find out that a couple hundred years past when we learned how to read, a couple thousand maybe, when we used writing as this temporary hack to pass knowledge. I will add that we underappreciate oral culture and orality. We think people before writing were stupid, and they most definitely were not. We had figured out a whole bunch of things in the world that we passed down orally because we didn't have writing in different ways. And then there's also the implications of writing. I will point here to the alphabet versus the goddess from Leonard Schlein, who says that the linear alphabet actually changed our brains, that before linear alphabets, we were very pictographic, we were very visual and associative, and very left-right hemisphere balanced, and that the right brain made us more analytic, linear, paternalistic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big thesis, and I'm not sure I buy it in its entirety, but I love the thesis, actually. It affected me a lot years ago. In an interest to help us get through our reading stacks for retreats, I invented the 5-minute university years ago. And that was, hey, if there's something you know a lot about, which could include a book, it could include how to make tea or how to make a good bolognese sauce, why don't we give you 5 minutes in front of the group to tell us just the pithy essence of what you learned, and then 5 minutes for the group to ask you questions, and then bounce to the next person, so that we get through 6 people in an hour if it works properly, and then everybody knows whom to sit next to at lunch or dinner, the next time, or to Zoom with later on, et cetera. It's a nice way to get through things. I know that my reading stack is insane, and I hardly buy physical books anymore. I've been trying to find a carpenter who will build a bookcase here in Portland. Can't seem to find one. They're all booked or weird. But my Kindle, so I don't have a Kindle device at all, but a Kindle runs on all my devices. And my Kindle library is quite big and full of books that I've just dipped into. I don't finish that many books these days, but I read a lot and sit with lots of different thinkers as they go. This group is probably highly focused on books and reading because we're older folk who grew up reading and who value our libraries a lot, and that's just how we've associated. I think that we've attracted other people who are like that. So I think we're not representative of the general of Gen Pop, the general population, but I think we come from book culture in lots of different ways, our age, our backgrounds, etc. Lots of people have said there's going to be a post-literacy of some sort. I look around at emojis and visual representation languages and even videos and movies, and I'm like, there is nothing that I have seen, that I have personally witnessed, that transmits information as compactly, succinctly, and sort of consistently as writing. I think writing does a great job of that, and I have not found any iconic pictographic other kind emoji-ish substitute to any of these things. There is now, Gil was saying, hey, gosh, I'm going to have to get my video creation chops up in the chat. There is now machine learning that you feed it a conversation like this, and it will find segments, it will dress them up and post them onto TikTok or whatever. There is software now that will parse it, subtitle it, give it some bling, and put it out for you. I'll post a link to a couple of names of those software, those apps that are already available, but they cost money, but it's there, so that's coming. And then I will also say that literacy seems to be inversely correlated with prosperity and consumerism. That when you get a sort of a lazy, happy society, at least that thinks it's happy, even though there's lots of strife going on, literacy goes down, the urgency to communicate goes down. In countries like Cuba and Argentina and other places, in Cuba in the 50s, they gave all students 2 weeks off, or maybe it was even, it wasn't a year off, but they basically said, let's stop going to school, let's find all the illiterate adults and let's teach them to read. And literacy rates in Cuba went to 98%. 98%, bam. And we are a famously illiterate nation, partly because we don't feel the need to read. We don't have social pressure, economic pressure, other kinds of pressure to figure things out like that. So I think that's a piece of it. And then finally, there's a lovely question that's behind all this, which is, I think, our key reason why OGM exists, which is about learning itself. Like, hey, how does learning actually happen? How do we make learning better for everybody? How do we make learning materials available for everybody? And what the hell are learning materials? Like, what do we even mean by learning materials? And I think that the LLMs of the world are changing that formula rapidly, because we're starting to figure out that an intelligent external intelligence might actually be the Ladies Illustrated primer that Diamond Age features way back when. Was it Diamond Age? I think it is. from Neil Stevenson. So there's lovely philosophical questions about learning that we should come back to, and we have often sort of turned over here, but we haven't faced directly. That maybe would be a great topic for a future talk. Sorry to go on for so long, but everything y'all said was triggering a bunch of really nice ideas for me. With that, we go to Klaus. And if Klaus, if you wanted to, you're muted. And if you want to take a pause, feel free to, because that was a lot.
I was just thinking, let's take a breath.
Please.
Yeah, that was a lot. So I would divide, first of all, between why are we reading? Is it for entertainment? No, is it for enjoyment, or is it because I want to learn something and I'm interested in a certain topic that I need to get into? Is it technical in nature, or is it romantic or adventurous? And so, I mean, what do you call it? I mean, books that you read, what do you call them again? Voice books.
Audiobooks.
Audiobooks are very popular. The library now issues audiobooks. My wife picks books and we listen to them in the car when we drive into more remote areas, and that's quite pleasant. When I read technical books, so I love to go down to the bookstore and browse, and I can read probably 5-6 books while I'm browsing through there, because a lot of technical books are filling, material. I mean, they're just elaborating in ways that goes beyond the need to know kind of thing, if that's technical information you're interested in. So it's actually not very efficient to read a book in order to learn something that you are specifically interested in. And so that's the information is just readily available in snippets. Then as it comes to AI, I just finished a course at Wharton University where they were teaching teachers how to use AI in the classroom in order to teach students, and they are training the AI to break down a question or a specific topic. Let's say they use like Moore's law. How do you explain Moore's law to a student who has never heard of this? And the way that the AI then responds to it is by asking the student questions and initiating a back and forth to make the conversation interactive. So this is a big thing underway. I have 4 granddaughters, and I just bought them Amazon tablets, which have Khan Academy on them. And Khan Academy just created Khan Migo, which is an AI tutor specialized in being a personalized, individualized tutor for students. And that tutor is completely intuitive, in engaging the child based on feedback that the tutor knows how to interpret, to understand what level that child is at, what level of comprehension, how fast you can release information, how fast it can be absorbed. So there's a lot of that underway. And bottom line is, our knowledge has exploded and keeps continuing to explode. When you were 50 years ago, there just wasn't that much to talk about when you really think about it, right? I mean, today, every year, we are adding to the knowledge base of humanity so much material that, I mean, who knew about quantum physics? Well, now you need to get into it, because new technology is based on it, and computers are all of a sudden converging into that topic. So I think separating, why we are learning, what is the topic, and then finding the right instrument to teach that particular topic, or for yourself to learn that particular topic, would be the first step of engagement here.
Thank you, Klaus. Stacy,
Wow, so much.
too bad you asked a silly question, eh?
No, I didn't think it was silly. I thought it sounded very like against the grain. Well,
Oh, not
anyway,
at all.
I
Yeah.
definitely didn't think I thought it was important. Yeah, what I want to say. So the reason I brought it up though, it's not that I think there's something bad with reading. I understand the value in reading. I brought it up here because so many of us here seem to be looking for social solutions and building bridges. And to that ends, I don't think creating written material is necessarily the best way. So like somebody like me, I'm not a reader. 50% of my reading were the books that I had to read in college. 49% were the books for my spiritual journey. And 1% are the things I had to read in order to be connected to a book club or something I wanted to do. My reading, I was an avid reader of comic books. I read TV Guide from cover to cover. I read signs, I read receipts, I read boxes. I'm an avid learner. I learned a lot on Facebook because I would see conversations that I wanted to be a part of. So I had to go and learn and research and do the information. That was my motivation for learning. So I think motivation has a lot to do with it. But the reason I bring up Facebook is this, and especially when I hear people like Mike say how he's becoming addicted. What I think should be obvious is that people are starving for attention. Look at the way they act on Facebook. Everybody wants to be seen and heard. And you mentioned, Jerry, about, why are all these books being created? Well, I'm not even going to go into that whole thing now, but that is the question that I want to explore. And it has something to do with the thread, what was it, symbolic capitalism thread. So, I'll leave that for another time. But I just wanted to say I understand the value in reading. There have been times, especially when I've really felt alone, where I fell into a book and that book saved me. So I definitely understand reading. But I'm just saying that we need something that allows other voices, and I mean voices, to be heard. Because again, just going by myself, there's so much I want to say, like even on that symbolic capitalism thread. It would take me 2 hours and it would feel like I was writing a paper for school. And I'm just done with that. It's like, I don't want to do it. Why am I being pulled into this old system that I don't even believe in to try and convince people of something? Like, what's the point? So, okay, thank you. Rant over.
Thanks, Stacy. Lovely rant. Gil.
This call has produced a higher percentage of rants than any I can remember in a long time.
Nice.
I was sitting here watching Jerry, wondering, like, is the guy going to go 5 minutes without breathing at all?
And if I can interrupt for a second, I'm conscious of eating up too much of our call time, and I had a lot to put in, so that's why I raced. But at the end, when you said, "Why didn't you breathe?" I'm like, "Why didn't I breathe?"
Well, because something happened. Stacy said something, and something got provoked in you and a whole bunch of us. So it's great. And Stacy, again, thank you. So, I got a bunch of thoughts too. I want to kind of keep them constrained, but I want to start with reflections on two readers that I know, and the effect they've had on me. Gregory Bateson, who some of you know, polymath anthropologist, cybernetician, ecologist, politician, and so forth. Whenever I've been with him, I've observed this remarkable thing happening that I've never seen before. He's talking and talking, and then just starts to quote at length, like a poem or a passage of Shakespeare, a product of an educational system when there was the thing that we revile called learning by rote. But what it meant was he had full, complete, random access to an enormous volume of literature in his being that would arise when it was called for in a conversation. It was stunning and deeply inspiring and very moving to see that happen. Number one. Number two, Fernando Flores, who is a voracious reader, he's got like 30,000 books in his personal library, reads hundreds of books a year, reads, he would say in quotes. And what he doesn't do is read a book from cover to cover. He approaches a book as a conversation with the author. So he'll, skim, hop around, do the Evelyn Wood thing of read the front and the back and the table of contents in the first sentence of a chapter, and then go read reviews online and look at YouTube interviews with the author and do a kind of multimodal move through the material, of which the book is a piece and an anchor. And I think we are talking about multimodal communication here. One of the opportunities, like the question that I'm thinking about as I look at reinvigorating my video chops, is to produce everything multimodal. I have a friend, Jeremy Sherman, I don't know if he still does this, but he would write pieces and post them, and then he would do audios of the same piece so you could read it or hear it. And, could do a read or hear or an AI-generated video, various forms, various lengths. I'm starting to use an AI gadget to clip the Living Between Worlds monthly conversations to automatically pull out 30-second or 40-second caption clips out of the 90-minute conversation. The concern I have with the proliferation of the AIs and the AI tools is kind of a regression to the mean. Everything gets boiled down to a simplified average based on all of the stuff that we all are, and we lose the distinction of the individual consciousness and experience that, for example, people here bring. I don't want to see a work come out that is the average of the OGM community. I want to hear the distinct voices of the OGM community. And so somebody mentioned this before, we seem to all of us be reduced to chasing the algorithm. And if you watch YouTube and the YouTube influencers, it's really strange. I mean, the thumbnails of YouTube have all turned into shouting. So-and-so destroys so-and-so. So like, clickbait attention grabbing. I've stopped watching Occupy Democrats because they've turned into all clickbait headlines that bear no relation to the content. So in a world where everybody's chasing the algo, and for all of us as symbolic capitalists, which I will assert that we are, we need to be thinking about whom are we trying to reach. Because we talk some in this conversation about we're not able to reach the masses, but I don't think we're up to reaching the masses here. So I'm inviting something much more strategic as we think about what media do we play with. Let's think about for the sake of what. I'm done.
Thanks, Gil. Yeah, I don't think we're on the Joe Rogan trajectory here or desire to have a mass audience or anything like that. It would be nice to have a more diverse community would be great.
A word for Joe
Gil.
Rogan. A word for Joe Rogan. I just watched one of his things yesterday. He was talking with, oh God, who was it? It was Joe Rogan and Bernie Sanders. And it was one of the more thoughtful interviews I've ever seen. Rogan was respectful, attentive, contexted, deep, interested, evoked really good stuff from, it was not the cartoon Joe Rogan that I think of, but something quite different, quite impressive.
Cool, thank you. Mark.
Wonderful topic. Thank you, Stacy. As you can see, there's some books. That's about, I don't know, maybe a fifth of the books that I have. I used to read, and I had some health issues, and I don't really read anymore. Spend a lot of time on YouTube, reposting on Facebook, and a friend was ranting yesterday over the phone. Facebook basically doesn't let his posts be shown to other people. And that was, certainly the sense that I get when I post some difficult things. And this is a book that Jeremy Sherman helped and I helped write. Incomplete Nature, How Mind Emerged from Matter by Terry Deacon at UC Berkeley. Gil, I didn't know you knew Jeremy. Interesting guy. It took me 8 months to read with the help of the author and a team. Book changed my life. I recommend it to anybody. It'll take you, anywhere from 2 to 8 months to read. Now, I like to look at the larger systemic, this question is within a system. And just an anecdote, I was talking to a education specialist at UC Berkeley, maybe about 20 years ago. And he asked me a really interesting question. How did you become curious? My path has been, up to, basically getting cancer or not even cancer, but chemo, changing the way my brain works. How did he asked, become curious? And I paid attention to that. And I've noticed a curiosity deficit. And TLDR and LLM summarizations. I love reading Lincoln, Blake, the 1800s of Britain, the 1700s of Britain. The language is, certainly Shakespeare, the language is incredible. It's not language that we have in our word hordes presently, terrifically unexamined. And that beauty, if you read Nabokov and you read Nabokov out loud, OMG. And, do I want to see the movie Lolita? It really doesn't have that same frisson of the tastiness of words that are hammered out with glee and intention. And we miss that at our, if you don't do that, then that's on you. But how do we, I was fortunate to go to University High School in Irvine, about 4 blocks away from UCI. And UCI education students would come to our high school and sit in our classes and learn how our teachers taught. I'm a lucky SOB. I had mentors that I didn't realize at the time. Well, it's not exactly true. I knew they were good teachers. I had good parents. Lately, I've been getting, let's call it, pushback for being a smartass. My dad was a smartass. My mom was a smartass. They were American Mexicans, and my dad American Costa Rican, and they were passionate SOBs. And I certainly don't want to make this about me, because it's not. It's about, as we say, the community. But the communities that I'm entering aren't used to people like me. And I've been saying, I didn't ask to be smart. It's how I was raised. Catholic Church, good teachers. Now, Catholic Church scales, but it's got a lot of pushback for some really, really good reasons. Certainly, pedophilia is not something I recommend as a culmination of 3,000 years of historical tradition. But we can't look at the worst part of me or you or the Catholic Church and say it's all bad, which is the trick of TLDR, of a summary that just says, look at this, look at this, look at this. Don't look over here. Look at this, look at this, look at this. It's a trick. I see it. But how do I scale that? What did I ask the other day? It was Popper in a Popperian Facebook thing. How do I falsify fake news? I'll leave you with that thought.
Shit, I've muted. I didn't realize it. Thank you, Mark. We're off to Rick, and just to bring Ken up to date, Stacy asked at the top of the call, this is maybe a dumb question, but why is this group so much about books and reading? And we've taken off with that. So, Rick.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on something that Gil mentioned about regression to the mean. I think it's okay metaphorically, it's kind of loose, but I don't see it as regression to mean, because people's knowledge areas, their profiles is variable. There are some things where I'm way below the mean, and there are other areas where I'd like to think I'm above the mean. But even if I'm above the mean, I still find that I can use AI and learn something new. So it's not always down. You're not always bringing the top down, the bottom up. I think you can certainly co-elevate the bottom, but it depends. And I sometimes, have areas where I know something. I think I know something about it, and then I just go, "Oh, I didn't know that." So I think it's far more nuanced in terms of thinking about co-creating human AI synergies. And I would like to point out, and I've raised this point before, I think, some time ago, but one of the limitations of this framework that we're using now, which is basically a facilitator-centered conversation where people put their hands up, and it can be monologue, it can be quasi-dialogue, but it's not really dialogue. So I think, in neo-learning, we have to be much more expansive in playing around with different ways of actually creating or co-creating generative dialogue. And I don't see this format as a way of doing that to a particularly high level. There's little smattings here and there, but if we're actually going to develop a more sophisticated learning methods, we have to think about how we can set up collaborative and transformational learning that evokes generative and strategic dialogue.
Thanks, Rick. Dave.
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It was a great way to kick it off. Yeah, lots of stuff. I guess one of the things I've been thinking, and so Stacy, I think, this group probably reads, but also, I engage with this group primarily through the Zoom call, right? Through the conversation, a little bit through the email list. I don't know how many of your books I read. Not that many, honestly. Sorry, guys. So I kind of ended up, and I was the original question for the session was going to be something like, what are we going to do in 2025? And I was trying to think of what that was going to be. And I do have kind of this, I want to help change other people's behavior kind of attitude still, which I'm a little bit concerned by, but hey, I own it. And so, in my 2025, I was hoping that we could help other people become more regenerative, right? Or adopt a regenerative mindset. And the strategy is like a communication strategy, but I wouldn't publish a book to do it, I don't think. But I do think I would try to use every channel possible, right? I kind of feel like what's happened is we have so many channels, and the channels have gotten in smaller and smaller pieces. They still have a power curve to them, but the curve has got many more points to it than it used to. So, my notion is that we try to empower people to talk to each other on all of the channels, kind of, and encourage that to be more regenerative, more collaborative and stuff. And so it's not just the book, and it's not the idea. We're not trying to come up with one answer. I mean, it's kind of what I think um, Rick was just saying. It is about learning, but I don't think we learn by getting hit in the head with a book. We learn by engaging in ideas, which is why I think these Zoom calls are so powerful, right? Because this is how we engage with each other in ideas. And so it's that engagement that we're provoking. And how do we kind of continue to provoke that, which has made me realize a little bit, like I know Klaus and Rick, a few of you like to kind of like on the listserv say, well, here I asked these questions, the AI, here's what the AI said, and you send a long treatise from the AI. I don't find that, I ignore them, basically. And I think it's because I don't really care what the AI has decided. I want to know what you decided and how you got there, kind of. So there's a human thing to the learning process that I think we need to internalize. And it isn't like there's a right answer, find it, done. It's much more a integration and immersion or something kind of experience. And we know some of this from research, right? I mean, we have a bunch of research about how people learn. And we know that, like, having a lecturer up on a stage blathering at people is not a great way to learn. It's just the way we've always been learning, but it's not the best way. And, it's much better to have people in conversation, challenging, debating, So, like I think I said before, that my kid went to this funky new college and it was all online. And so it was managed through an interface like this. And one of the rules in the college was that the lecturer couldn't lecture for more than 5 minutes. The platform would start to notify him if he spoke for more than 5 minutes, right? So it enforced the interaction, which is, I think, how we learn. So my question for 2025 is, how do I provoke the kinds of interaction that are going to lead to regenerative thinking in all kinds of different modalities? And I think this connects. I'll just make one more plug. And I'll try to get this back. I've mentioned a few times this movie, Join or Die, which Pete Davis has put together. It's kind of a pay on to Robert Putnam and the bowling alone notion. And he's arguing that, like he put out the Bowling Alone book, 20 years ago or something like that, 30 years ago. And he thought he diagnosed the problem and thought that was fixing it. But since then, it's actually continued to get worse. And we are continuing to bowl less, alone. And I don't know, for example, if that includes these Zoom calls as part of the community building. I mean, do these Zoom calls replace the Moose Lodge or not? Right? Are these Zoom calls as good as a bowling alley or not?
I think we need a secret greeting. We need a ritual handshake or something. That would probably help.
Yeah, I think that,
and very tiny cars with hats that we can run in parades.
Many more potlucks. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is this like the next generation of Moose Lodges or not? I mean, and part of the thing is that I think we've talked a lot about, like, Jerry, I know you've talked about trust. I think trust is probably essential, but again, there's a stack that gets to, if we were to say co-living together, if our goal is that we can live together well, right? Trust is important. The ability to actually use that trust to make decisions is another layer of the problem, And so there is something about the Moose Lodge where the Moose Lodge has to coordinate itself, and you learn skills about coordinating itself, right? That, lays on top of trust, I think. And so I feel like we kind of have to develop many layers of the stack, and maybe we've tossed a bunch of them away and now we're having to relearn them in some sense. But anyway, I'm going to try to get Pete Davis to come talk about that movie at some point, in which case I'll make sure to hit this list a few times and hope you guys will come play. But
that would be just awesome.
Thanks for letting me in.
Dave, thank you. We have a long queue. An interesting thought is email and chat didn't kill greeting cards. In fact, they kind of increase the value of somebody who stops and handwrites something and goes and puts a stamp on it and runs to the post box and drops it in, because it would have been so easy to do the alternative, right? So it becomes, I think, a more valuable gesture for having done that. Anyway, the Join or Die has a link, and it would be terrific to learn more about it. Third thought, Bowling Alone is probably one of those most cited, least read books out there, and I think often we assume what it says, and there's a whole lot there, and Putnam has evolved his thinking a whole bunch as well. So there's some interesting recent interviews with Putnam. Gil.
You're muted.
Okay, he's trying to find the unmute button, which he has succeeded in doing.
Dave, thank you so much for that. That was beautiful. I really appreciate that. Lots of ripples from that. And main one of which maybe is about persuasion. What if the point isn't persuasion? We all talk a lot about persuading other people. I have somewhere in my wetware brain this notion that Gandhi once said, all persuasion is violence. I haven't been able to find a citation for it. Maybe somebody else can, but the ripple of that has been very profound for me. What if persuasion is violence? And what if persuasion is not what we're about? What if we're about helping people learn? What if we're about helping people learn to coordinate more effectively and to coordinate more effectively for the sake of the things that we care about together? So for me, that's a very different frame than persuasion, where, you know, I got the right answer and I got the facts and I'm going to dump facts onto your head until you agree with me. Not interested in that at all. I'm interested in what happens in conversation between people, like here. I don't like the notion of a lecture being restricted to 5 minutes. I understand the point of it to drive interaction, but I have been in lectures that have gone for 90 and I'm hanging on every single word. So, you know, your mileage may vary. Back to the thing about regression to the mean. I'm not at all saying that AI is bad. I mean, I'm playing in that sandbox a lot. Alex and I have been building some incredible tools together. Marshall's doing some amazing work, which you mentioned in the chat. But you know, my concern is that what it will mostly do for most people is something like that. And there's some people who will use it in exceptional ways to invent new things and develop new insights. And I'm not saying this very well, but it reminds me of a story about Gene Roddenberry, who was approached as the story goes, at a cocktail party. And someone said to him, Mr. Roddenberry, I've been watching Star Trek for years, and you know, I really like a lot of what's in there. There's some wonderful stuff in there, but 98% of it is crap. And Roddenberry, without missing a beat, said, yeah, but 98% of everything is crap. So I'm not interested in that 98% part that is most of what AI will churn. I'm interested in the part that's remarkable, exceptional, that couldn't be done without it, that harnesses the massive scan and pattern matching and iteration possibilities at a scale beyond what humans can do to surface something that's new and valuable. But that depends a lot on the operator. And we've all seen the impact of well-constructed prompts. Poor prompts, good prompts, exceptional prompts, prompts that give context and meaning and purpose and produce something very different. And most people, in my experience so far, don't know how to use these tools well. They interact and they get out 98% crap level answers and say, oh, this is no good. This is useless. This is bad. So there you go.
Thanks, Gil. Klaus.
Yeah, I mean, interesting direction, David. You raised some good points here. I like the idea of neobooks, right? Because neobooks consist of nuggets, and that's, you know, Jerry's thought process here. And then each nugget is sort of a freestanding, self-sufficient page that or chapter that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now it fits into a larger story, but it's not like a normal book where you would have a continuation of the story. So these stories are independent, and one beauty of the neobooks is that you can take its nuggets and reassemble them in different ways and change the story outline. So maybe that's a new way for books to be formatted, you know, and encourage learning. Then I mean, to your point that don't just post, you know, the output of AI. The output of AI is actually the result of some really careful prompting not just prompting, but also the insertion of information. Because, I mean, any article that I publish, I have done previous research. I give the AI links to books, to articles, to information to stimulate, a thought process. So it's actually very directed. There's nothing that comes out of the AI just on its own. And when you look at the college courses that are running currently at MIT and you name it, all the elite schools, Stanford actually in its MBA program right now is using AI. The papers have to be written with AI, but the student has to disclose the prompts and the editing for that paper. So the challenge right now is to interact with the AI in ways where you are focusing on this feeding the AI the information base, to stimulate the discussion, and then the value. I mean the question that you are asking has to be grounded and has to be well thought about. So that's a new art form, really, and that's what universities are now teaching. And so there is more to it. But then I appreciate, David, what you're saying. I don't want to just see like an AI output. So this actually requires yet another step, right, where it's now you now have to personally extract the key points and put it into your own language to make it more human and to restore the personalization of the information there. So yeah, I mean, we are entering a new era, and AI, like it or not, is structurally changing the way we communicate. And we just have to. I like neobooks in a way that is maybe an interim form of developing this new approach, and we have our neobook meetings, and we're trying to figure out how to structure the output in ways that's more communicable, either easier to convey and so on. So it's definitely work in process, but it's here. We just have to figure out how to incorporate it in ways that we feel comfortable dealing with it, and absorb and accept it.
Can I just jump back in on that? Because Klaus, that's really, I mean, I guess I feel like there's a tension between kind of coming up with the right answer, right, which maybe the AI can do, or kind of learning. And learning is different. Learning is understanding the right answer or something, right? It's internalizing the right answer. And so the way I've ended up flipping some of the neobook stuff is that there are nuggets, but the nuggets aren't to create the right answer, right? The nuggets are to help us create this notion of the shared narrative, right? It's like, what we need is a world where we all understand that, we can make the world better. We don't have to be, killing each other with trucks in New Orleans. And I don't know. I mean, that's the change we want to see in people. But that shared change is the internalization of this possibility, of this responsibility, of the participation in the shared enterprise, right? And that's the narrative that we'd like to have developed. But I don't get to decide your narrative for you. You have to do that. Right? I can only create an environment where perhaps your narrative and my narrative become more cohesive, right? So there's not going to be one narrative. There's going to be an infinite number of narrative or perspectives on the shared narrative, perhaps is a better way to say it. And so the AI thing, and maybe I'm wrong, right? And it's that the AI is going to say, no, here's your narrative, and here's all the logic for it, right? And I don't think that works personally, but that's kind of the other answer. Is instead I need to internalize what it is I'm seeing and believing and understand it for myself, and that's one of the layers of the stack that allows us to get to large scale cooperation that leads to a better world.
Yeah, no, this is really excellent, but and that is also a component of how you train the AI, because you have to provide context, right? So you have to have audience-specific context, and that's what you do with spiral dynamics. And because people in different worldviews have different contexts, And so you can do that with AI if you go deeper into training it, to explain that. And then also the most powerful form of teaching is tutoring, right? I mean, so that was what came out of Wharton, the most efficient way to train a child or anyone is through tutoring. Well, tutoring is very expensive. I mean, who can afford a tutor, right? So now, for example, Khan Academy with Khan Miko, now you have an AI individualized tutor. And these things are getting so much smarter so fast, right? In almost intuitively engaging that child or the student, I should say, not child, the student, in the capacity to learn, the style of learning and understanding and so on. So I mean, there's so much stuff in motion, right? It's very difficult to frame it, but I mean, we are definitely entering a completely new era.
Thanks, guys. Mike.
I think I am inclined to take the little pause here because it's just so much has been coming at us so quickly, and that is the theme of my coming year. I'm glad that Dave pointed us back to the email you sent out, Jerry, because I think it would be fun to hear from everybody what their big vision or stretch goal is for the coming year. I knew when you sent that out, though, that it wasn't going to be possible, given how we all have a lot to say about what we're hoping to do. I've got the usual things on my resolution list. I want to, lose some weight, which might help me snore less and sleep better. And but the thing that I really need to do better is ask favors of my different networks. I use social media for that. I often will put something out there and say, "Hey, I'm going to Iceland. What do you think I should do?" Or more often, it's with LinkedIn and some of the more focused networks I have. It's about a research project. Hey, I'm looking at Taiwan and need to know what exciting things they're doing on health data. But I don't do that well. And I periodically do it orally with this group, but I need to do a better job of targeting requests to 5 or 10 people who might be able to give me more insight. And the biggest problem I've been grappling with for years is how to do better what you do so well, Jerry. How do I capture those 10, 25 things a day that are things I want to get back to someday and someday will need. And I haven't figured it out. I mean, I'm 65 years old and I spend all this time processing and capturing information. And then I have to spend a huge amount of time trying to track down that bit of information if I need it for a footnote or I need it for a speech or I can't quite remember, who said it or where I read it. I mean, I think if we can crack that, the open global mind becomes this magical force for good, and people are less frustrated and less misled by disinformation. So that's my massive mega stretch goal for 2025, sorry.
From your lips to God's ears, Mike.
Jerry, I'm sorry I missed the last one. It sounded like it was just wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Mike. From your lips to God's ears. I years ago when I lived in Manhattan, so between 92 and 98, I had an appointment with an executive at Edelman in a high rise in Manhattan. Went to visit him, and he mentioned something. He said, "Oh, it's in a document that I want to show you." He then proceeded to spend 10 minutes looking through the A drive, the Z drive, the F drive, whatever in SharePoint. I think might not have existed back then, but he was trapped in Microsoft's horrible non-findable file software. And it just stuck in my head as this example of like so many of us are just wrestling with how to find the thing we know is somewhere, and it's never easily accessible. I had a similar experience like that at home. I had double stacked my books because I didn't have enough didn't have enough wall space. Had I had more, more bookcases, didn't have enough wall space for the books. And I knew I had a book and could not find it. And just searching online, boop, there's the book. It's like, the online thing really works. John, thanks for being with us as well.
Can I just jump in for an anomaly on that?
Please. I don't know about if you want an anomaly, or do you want to go ahead?
Was it an Amory Levin's lecture some, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago when the technology was acetate foils? Folks remember that?
Yay.
And Amory would travel with two roller bags chained together like a choo-choo train, and they were both filled with foils. And he's doing his presentation. He's standing by the overhead projector, and next to him is a 3-foot high stack of foils, and he's going through them from top to bottom, illustrating his lecture as he goes. And somebody asks a question. He says, "Wait a minute," and he reaches down 23.27 inches into the stack, pulls out one foil, drops it on the projector, and it's exactly the right one. So that's the contrast to most of us.
That definitely is an anomaly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gil. Stacy, see what you started?
And I'm so confused of where I want to go now. So just getting back to David and Klaus, yeah, I thank you for both of you for what you said. I'm a really big fan of the way Klaus programs the AI. But what I look at it for is I'd like to see the AI in the room with the powerful thinkers, AKA you guys, because I see that as holding people accountable that maybe I'm not saying this as well as I want to. Let me start over. I think that AI has the ability to bring out a bias in groups where a person wouldn't want to bring it up. And I'm not so interested in how I'm not a big fan of AI, period. But in groups where people are making decisions, then I am a big fan. When they're the group in power, it would be nice. Like I like the idea when Dave said that the lecturer gets flagged in 5 minutes, because that's something built into the system and it's going towards the person in power. If it were geared towards the audience, I'd have a problem with it. But because it's geared to somebody that already has more power, I'm like, okay, this is a nice balance feature. And because if I knew that it was being programmed in the way that Klaus programs it, then I'd feel totally safe. Because however he does it, it's in a way that it really takes in all different perspectives. I mean, you guys got to admit this group is skewed a certain way. And I think you're wonderful and I love you all. But, Mark put in, I saw women in AI. I'll have to take a look at that because I have to assume while they may be very similar to this group, there's got to be something different. Well, more so than me, Mark, because I'm not an AI person at all. So they'd be different from me and the same as you in some ways. So what did I want to say though? What was the original thing? I don't even remember because we've said so much and it's all been wonderful. So I guess I'll just leave it. I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Stacy. Alex.
Thanks. As always, everything's skewed to AI because it's such a big thing. And I just wanted to take note of what Gil said, which is about AI as a summarizer. Now, I've said it in a different group, so I don't think it was this one, which is if you go back to Google search the way it was, if you search for something, it would search for the exact words or the meanings related to that word and give you the top 1,000,000 pages of that in some ranking order. So you were free to go through as many of those pages as you wanted, read and find the differences and the similarities and come up with an opinion of what it was. But that's the naked word as it was. When you now train everything with AI, when you search the same words in AI, as Gil said, you will get an averaged version of those topics. But that is important because how you ask your question, as Gil said and as someone else said, is very important, because the average would change depending on the phraseology. Now, if you ask a question like, what is the capital of Germany? No amount of averaging differences will not come up with the right answer. It's a very specific answer. If you change a word, what was the capital of Germany 1,000 years ago? I don't know if it existed or what the answer is, but you might get a different answer because the averaging is across different corpus texts. So, but if you ask a more general question, open-ended question, the phraseology might get you to a different place, unless the average is overwhelmingly consistent. Now, here's the crazy thing about it, which is, I read that a long time ago, like 2 years ago when I started in AI. When they were training the AI, someone came up with a thesis or an idea or whatever piece of work that said, if you train the AI on just the good, let's say you have a topic and there's good and bad parts to it. If you train it only on the good, rather than the good and the bad, the AI is not as good at the end of the day as if you gave it both, and by the magic of AI training, it comes up with a good answer. It's as if the technology, I could go and bore you into the statistical parts of this, but I won't. The technology needs a yin and a yang in order to come up to some consensus. It seemed to at the time. So I guess I'm going all around this to specify there is a difference. If you're using AI, the level of confidence you give to the answer, be careful with it, because it depends on what you're asking, how open the open-ended questions are. And I could talk, if anybody's interested, contact me later. I could talk to you about how AI is trained and how the statistical part of it works to further understand this. But I just thought I'd kind of put this in the conversation. AIs are brilliant. I use them all the time. I code them all the time. But sometimes you have to be careful what you ask and how you ask it and how you understand it, more importantly. That's it. Monologue over. Oh, by the way, I've just seen Neo books. I think it's great. I didn't realize it was there. So
Sweet. Thanks, Alex. Rick.
Yeah, Stacey, did your thought come back to you while you were sitting there by any chance?
Oh, no, I'm
Oh,
not
that's
even
right, don't worry
trying.
about it. I think actually we've all done
Ah.
that, and we've all lost our train of thought in a conversation. But the thing that I find that I would like to propose maybe some ideas about how to have some variability in this format, and I'll just give two. One is that when somebody speaks, that they announce I finished, and then people put their hands up to respond to that person. Because I've been triggered by somebody who spoke several times ago, and I'm having to recall that and think, okay, how am I going to respond to now? Well, if it were in the moment, it would be very different. And so there is from my point of view, a significant structural limitation. There are merits to it, but there's some downsides to it as well. And Mike, when you spoke about everyone saying what the New Year's resolution, of course it would take too much time, but we can break into triads and do it that way. So you can be fully present with 3 people about what it is that you want to, do. And so I think having some variability in the format is critically important. But I want to go back to a theme that actually Stacey and Dave brought up. Is either skepticism or anti-AI thinking or responses to it. And I just want to, respond to that brief exchange that Klaus and I had about that was brought on by Gil's, posting of symbolic capitalism. And I knew about that stuff before, and for me, it had the same sort of feel as white fragility. So when Gil said, "Oh, we're all symbolic capitalists," and I'm saying, I don't think so. No, what do you mean? You're stereotyping the whole crew here, and there's variations on a theme. So, and so I have that same response. And so in tongue in cheek, I sort of thought I'll put a counterpoint into it and started talking about the alt-right symbolic unwoke capitalists, because it gets into sort of identity politics. And, you know, it just doesn't, you know, I just felt that that article lacked nuance. I mean, it's describing a phenomenon. There's some points on it, but there's a sort of, you know, maybe a pejorative labeling of the term. And I'm thinking, I just don't find it helpful. I mean, I think his description of how he went to Syracuse University and yada, yada, I thought was phenomenal. That's different perspectives. But then people then codify something into a construct. And I think, it's sort of sticking a label on people, and labeling is important, but it has upsides and downsides. So I just want to put a plea into allowing the flow of the conversation to go based upon what somebody said. So I don't have to remember the, you know, 3 or 4 people's back what they've been saying. Because in natural conversations, if you're in small groups of 3 to 4, you don't have to put your hand up to speak. You just
So
let it
yeah,
flow. So I feel strongly about this, Jerry, and whether you want to stay with this format, it's up to you, because I still come. But I think variations on a theme would be helpful.
so 2 answers to your question, Rick. One is, I think variations on methods and all that are a great idea. I don't do breakouts a lot because I really like plenary. I like everybody to hear what everybody said. You can, you know, you can talk separately, but sometimes we hit a theme where it would be really useful to go, you know, powwow in a smaller group where you can actually go deeper, etc. So variations, yes. I just take notes in the chat and don't hit return, or sometimes I just put things into the chat and then go look them up later because I can find them there. I have no trouble replying to somebody 5 people back. And if you can, and Mark was pointing to his envelope because I think he was saying, just take a note right there. Those are notes that he wants to put back in the conversation. It doesn't have to be an envelope from a bill, but I've moderated lots and lots of these, and I find that trying to chase the quick answers actually is more distracting than being patient with who waited to talk and letting people who have something to comment on wait for a little bit before coming back in. Otherwise, we wind up spiraling too close into something, and that doesn't work all that well. Sometimes it does, and then also in Zoom, it feels different to me than in a live room. But in a live room, I still kind of keep a queue and I allow for some little bubbling up of, wait, I want to comment on this thing here. Bob Frankston and I had a signal where, you know, if he would say, he would just hold up, it's just a short comment. I promise, it's just a short comment. Yeah, two seconds. It's like, that sometimes works and sometimes it spirals out of control. So Rick, I appreciate that this MO doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but I've discovered that the Zoom hand is actually not a miserable proxy for who would like to take the floor next and go there. It works reasonably well that I don't say, don't use the hand, I'm going to do it with my eyes and keep my own cue or keep traffic. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, just very briefly, what I said was that you put your hand up after the person spoke, and that person can then say, Gil, what would you like to say in response to what you posted about symbolic capitalism? And then as far as breaking into small groups, that could be the last 20 minutes, whatever, you know, it's just options. And the reason why I just don't feel that some of my best conversations where it's conversational, there's no, you know, you get into the conversational flow. And anyway, somebody's calling me. I'll let you get on. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Rick. Mark.
Oh, yeah, I am unmuted. Thank you, Rick. I mean, I really have participated in a number of both in-person experiments in facilitated group communication, and one of the groups here, Embassy San Francisco, they have hand signals, you know, please, I can't take it anymore. Or, you know, I have a pointed reply and a short one. And, you know, there's, you know, I am a little more active in, you know, just the way I was raised, than a talking head. I'm here among the talking heads. Hi, talking heads. You know, I have a body. Hi. And, you know, in a chair. And gosh, you know, I turn off my video and basically, gosh, you know, I'm so tense. You know, I don't want to stretch and massage myself on camera. It's a weird way to communicate. Now, I wanted to highlight, basically, there's a lot of women philosophers who are completely ignored. And a lot of philosophers of cognition and AI. I mean, think back at Brenda Laurel. I think everybody here knows Brenda Laurel or knows of Brenda Laurel.
Possibly not. I think she's more obscure than you think, but raise your hand if you've heard of Brenda Laurel. So that would be no.
Wow.
I've met Brenda Laurel. She gave a speech for us at PC Forum years ago, and I'll put her link in the chat. But Mark, yeah, uh-huh.
Gosh, that is like computers as theater back in the early 90s. A book that thick, multimodal,
Oh, I think I know her.
multimodal presentation, married to Rob Tao, who is what was it? I mean, basically I knew these people from the well in the late 80s and early 90s. And no AI is gonna basically read that book for you. None whatsoever. The notion of immanence in cognition and living, as opposed to transcendence, is the basic difference between, a woman bringing a child, bearing a child. What is it? What do they say in Breakfast? The chicken contributes to the ham and eggs, but the pig is committed.
In a breakfast of ham and eggs, the chicken is involved, the pig is committed.
Yeah, something like that. Yes, thank you. And Starhawk, a witch. How many people know Starhawk? Super. Who was it? At the Holy Names College in Oakland, she was invited to do a lecture course by, oh gosh, Original Blessing, the author of Original Blessing, and he got
Matthew Fox.
Thank you. He got bonked by the Pope at the time, which was the German guy. Oh, forgive me, brain.
Benedict.
Yes, Pope Benedict, whose other name is
Wojtyła. No, not Wojtyła was the other pope.
No,
Benedict was
Frickin' Nazi.
well, he had a German past. As a Catholic, we're a big tent, but the big tent doesn't always win the election. I'm used to the Mexican Santerias. And
Joseph Ratzinger.
That's it, Ratzinger. What a name, Ratzinger. That's, oh my God, it's just, in English, that's just weird. But I remember, I'll make this anecdote as short as possible. Being at a party, there was a young woman that I was very interested in, and she was completely ignoring me. And I was, she was kind of going, well, I believe in this and I believe it. And so I used the magic term of Catholics. Tell me about your faith. And she opened up and she's like, oh my God, I'm totally into Santeria, and you can't do that black magic thing in your house because you don't want that energy. So basically I have like a hibachi on wheels, and like I do all the black candles set up, and then I wheel it outside into the garden, and then I do my rituals. I'm just like completely stunned at this revelation of Catholic paganism, which is feminine. Not sure.
Brief story, Mark, connected to your thing. Brenda Laurel joined a company called Purple Moon. She may have been the founder, which melted into Wiccan backstabbing. It was apparently like meetings were like, you took my image off your shrine and whatever. This was scuttlebutt sort of in the industry, but it was supposed to do games for girls and what dissolved into Wiccan acrimony. So who knows how all this stuff happens? Sometimes you hear, sometimes you don't. Gil, you may have the penultimate word in this conversation.
Yeah, it strikes me that that thing may have involved human beings.
Yeah.
Yes. Bing.
And I hate to say this, but women.
Hey, so Mark, to your point about no AI is going to read that book for you. Yes, sir. And it won't care what it has read. And AIs don't care, and they can't. And human beings do care, and they can't not. And that's what I got on that.
Thank you very much, Gil. Ken, the challenge is to you, and also you were a little bit late to the call, so you missed the first part where we got warmed up. Has this triggered a poem for you?
Oh, always, a dozen poems get triggered, but I'm going to read something I wrote about 17 years ago. I don't know if I share my own poetry, but this seems appropriate for the new year. I call it, If War Worked, We'd Have Peace by Now. If war worked, we'd have peace by now. Perhaps it's time to try something different. Here are some things from my list. What's on yours? Let's use our intelligence to nourish all life. Let's speak words for healing, not hating. Let's try thinking with our hearts and feeling with our minds. Let's focus our gaze on the horizon and then turn towards each other and inquire into what we see together. Let's attune our ears to the echoes of our grandparents' love as we listen to the laughter of our grandchildren. Let's make sure we include infants and elders when we need to make important decisions. Let's feel the earth flowing through each of us in each moment that we breathe, eat, labor, rest, love, and dream. And let's align our current ecosystems to harmonize with Gaia's ancient ecosystems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You shared that?
I can.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I meant to mention somebody wrote about cards for facilitation in the chat. I invented red, green, and yellow cards for retreats years ago, which was meant to be how people could say, I agree, disagree, or I'm really ambivalent about something, and people would hold them up, and we would have little cards with us during meetings, until I discovered with the Occupy movements that we all have a green card, red card, and a yellow card on board, like right here. And I encourage every meeting, every speech I give, every meeting I attend, I encourage people to use the Occupy hand signs, which are borrowed from sign language, but they really work. There were other signs that Occupy used, like means I can't agree with this decision, I will block it. There's a few other hand signs that they used. This means not loser, but louder, I think, like I can't hear you. But it's
This is point of order. This is clarifying question.
Yep. Thank you. And what I love about this, as opposed to this, which is a lot of modern kids were taught in school as a replacement for applause, which I really don't like. This is noisy. This is not noisy at all. And in Zoom gallery view, this is great because you get I'm always watching all of you for facial expressions. Are you nodding off? Exactly what Ken just did. Micro expressions of resentment. All that kind of stuff. So thank you.
Never assume a micro expression. Never assume a micro expression. I learned that the hard way.
You mean never assume that the other person did one?
That you interpreted it correctly.
Yeah.
And point of history.
Harder in a larger group where you can't see the micro expressions a couple of rows back.
The beats and poets, certainly when the folk movement was around in the 60s and then the 50s, this was what people would do for applause. San Francisco, New York history, Greenwich Village.
Thank you. Is there interest in the what hot project do you have that you would like to put in front of the group topic that was meant for today, which would put it for next week? Mike
you're
is
not
very
gonna be
much into
here.
it.
But you're not
And-
going to be here.
But I'm not going to be here for this call next week. I said that at the top of the call. And I, in fact, will be giving a talk, so I won't be able to open the room. So we need a replacement Zoom. If anybody would like, pardon?
Can you make someone co-host now? For that meeting?
Zoom, I have not figured out how, without short of giving somebody your password access to pretend to be you, which is awkward also for other reasons. It's really hard to do. So for next week, we'll need an alternate Zoom and host open to anyone who'd like to do that.
Check my calendar.
But cool. And also, whatever the call is about, Mike, you seem to be the only one who's enthusiastic about the what project do you have going? Dave,
We'll miss half of next week, so ignore my enthusiasm.
Just on the Zoom thing, Jerry.
Yeah.
My wife has a Zoom call and she was sick, and we figured out that you can. You don't have to have a host. You can set it up so people can show up and participate. And you turn off the waiting room and you allow participants to join. There's a couple things you click, and you don't have a host, and you probably can't do an AI recording, but you can set it up so people can join your call without you being there.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. I have it set up so that there's no waiting room here, but I have to show up to open the call, but I didn't know you could turn that off. Thank you, Dave.
Dave,
And define a co-host.
Dave, is that a global setting or for an individual call?
I don't remember, but we figured it. We troubleshooted it and we figured it out.
I don't think you'll be able to record, and you wouldn't be able to boot bots or anything. Right?
Exactly. And I
Right.
like to record the calls, so I would prefer to have somebody who's actually got a Zoom account. Gil?
I'm happy to offer mine. I'll put the link in the chat in just a second.
And
That sounds terrific.
I would also like to ask if anybody's interested in continuing the conversation on symbolic capitalism, but starting with the AI critique that Klaus put forward, because I think there's a lot to be learned in why it's even the way it is. Like, I'm not interested in saying who is one, who isn't one, but why this phenomena occurs, because for me, it's something that I see very clearly. So if anybody wants to have that conversation, please pick a time, because I'm not writing
Mark?
about it.
There's
Yeah.
two
Mark, go
questions
ahead.
that I have. One is, when is the Neo books? Which day is the Neo? Is it Thursdays at 2?
I
Mondays.
put in the chat, it's Mondays at 2 p.m.
Mondays at 2 p.m. Okay. And Stacy, my deep learning has always pointed from symbolic to semiotic. So, that's a pretty advanced kind of shift, but that's
That mean, Mark?
the opposition.
And
Mark,
let me
I'm
just
not-
say that I didn't even read the article. Like, I didn't even read the article. I just read the email thread. I might go back and read the article, but I'm not really that interested in the article. I'm interested in what came out of the article.
Wow. I'm not interested in conversations about an article with people who haven't read the article.
I didn't say, that's so judgmental.
No, I'm just saying I'm not interested.
Was pretty.
I'm not judging anything. I'm not interested. Not judging.
Okay, we need to wrap the call, but there's a thought in my head brewing that and just in the last couple of days in a conversation, I connected these three things in my brain: symbolic capitalism, elite overproduction, and performative progressives. These are three different two-word phrases that are being used to critique sort of the left and elites and intellectuals. And I'm curious about how they work and what they mean and what they imply for us going forward. So maybe in 2 weeks we could, Stacy, I think it's an elaboration of what you're asking, which is what is up with this symbolic capitalism thing.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Dave.
Just could you repeat those three terms again?
Yeah. So symbolic capitalism, elite overproduction, and performative progressives. These are three accusations I've heard since the election and before the election. A very good friend of mine who's more conservative than I has been bitching about how Democrats are just performative. Like they all show up for the Black Lives Matter protest, then they show up for the Me Too protest, and they wear a pink hat and whatever, but nothing ever gets done. They flit like bumblebees from issue to issue, but it's a performance. It's not actual sincere effort. And I'm getting into the actual conversation here. But elite overproduction is a whole critique about how there are just too many people who think they run the country. And I'm misframing that. But I'd love to understand the three terms better, because it feels like there's a concerted, these are part of the, God, I want to say the attack on expertise, except I think expertise in many cases is really broken. So I'm part of the attack on expertise as well. There's a whole bunch of issues that are kind of tangled up in here that I find really fascinating and of the moment.
I have a question.
Please.
Besides Dave Gray, who originally posted this about a month ago on the list, and then I followed up and mentioned it in the chat last week, how many people have read that article? Not the symbolic capitalism, who I am and what it's about, but the actual article Dave posted about how people who are symbolic capitalists, especially on the left, are terrible at recognizing how unconscious they are and how stuck they are. Anybody else read that article?
I read the first third and I didn't finish it, but then I read the about symbolic capitalism piece from the same guy because I needed to better understand that. And that's where I ran out of time.
Okay.
I just say,
Because that is one of the things that would be really juicy to talk about is why are we so unable to recognize, we justify why we think we're right and constantly say, no, I'm above that. And that is where we end up in trouble. And that would be a really interesting conversation for me, not about who's a symbolic capitalist and who's not.
Sounds great.
And
okay.
thank you, Dave, for posting that originally.
Can I just say, I didn't know what symbolic capitalism was. I asked ChatGPT, and for the first time ever, I have no idea what it's saying.
I have
no idea.
I had a conversation. I posted a link to my ChatGPT, but apparently it doesn't work. I'm going to put it on the thread. I had a conversation with the AI about symbolic capitalism, and so you can see how it engages.
I just put the link to the article in the chat. And so I'm thinking 2 weeks from now, this is a really good topic. So let's do that.
If I could just add one thing real quick to
Please.
Ken's point, that's exactly what you just said. That's exactly why I didn't read the original article, because just when I was reading through the thread, what you brought up is exactly what triggered me and made me interested. So not that I wouldn't go back and read it, but my interest is starting from what you just said. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, with that, I thank you all for a great call. That was really fun and illuminating. So, see y'all on the inner tubes.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yep.